Welcome back to Strat Talk. We're going to be jumping back into the 1830 tournament with Game P this time. We have Are You Happy, Pyramidian, Skunky Beer, and Antonio in the auction. RU is going to be leading us off, and actually we see a pass and even a master mode pass, so not sure what happened there. Kind of an unusual first action, but we'll move right along. Pyramidian is going for the Camden and Amboy. Skunky Beer going for the M&H. Antonio is joining on the Camden and Amboy. We'll see if Are You Happy is actually going to join the auction here. It looks like he goes on the M&H as well. So two privates with two players each. Pyramidian is potentially setting up for an early pull here. Skunky is going for a overbid on the M&H and a pretty hefty one at that. Antonio is going to go for the D&H. We'll see if anybody wants to prevent this early ripcord. Are You Happy going for the D&H, which potentially means Pyramidian is going to just pull here, and he does. Two cheap privates, $15 revenue, should be pretty safe from the B&O. We'll see if he ends up with the C&A or not. That's the only other private he has. Are You Happy is on the D&H and the M&H. Antonio is on the D&H and the C&A. And Skunky Beer is just on the M&H, so needs to make sure they win that or they're going to be falling on the B&O. Antonio leads us off on the D&H, and we see this private bid up to looks like it goes for 105 to Antonio, and we are on to the M&H now. Are You Happy is bidding to 145 on that, and we're back to Skunky Beer. That will go for 165 on the M&H, and it looks like Skunky Beer has lost out on the only private he was actually active on, and as a result should be getting the B&O. So we'll see what the C&A goes for here. Pyramidian and Antonio also, or both have fairly decent private revenue right now and already have a fair amount of capital invested, so may see this go fairly cheap. Actually goes for 230, decent price, and it looks like Antonio is going to run away with that with the D&H and the C&A. So a little bit over privatized, won't be floating his own company most likely. And Skunky Beer takes the B&O and pars it at 76, a pretty low par. That brings us into stock round one. Antonio, as noted, really doesn't have the cash to float. We'll see what he does here. Just passing for now. May want to spread his cash for paying shares a little bit later. RU is going to take the C&O and pars it at 71. I suppose is anticipating the B&O will float and just wants to operate behind him. Pyramidian is going to take the NYH and actually floats over the B&O, so not worried about buying in the privates. Doesn't have the most exciting privates, so a little bit less painful for him, but it's still painful in the sense that by operating early, you're buying trains that maybe allow other people to buy in their privates, so still something to think about. Skunky Beer taking the B&O, no surprises. We'll run through this pretty quickly here. Looks like pretty much everybody has floated their companies, and did the C&A player do anything? No, just sitting on his cash for now. NYH is up, is going to lay towards the B&M and buys 3 trains, so he's going full send on the early revenue strategy for the NYH. We'll see how that plays out. B&O is heading toward Lancaster, like it. Don't like that he didn't buy a train. Maybe thinking that his B&O revenue is going to be better than his run next OR, so wants to neglect buying a train. All right, well, I suppose that's true. He's going to be running for 50 and only getting about half of that anyways. So his revenue probably is better, but he's going to fall back. We'll have to monitor that decision. C&O heading towards Chicago, and it doesn't buy in his privates. Could have if he wanted to fully invest, but his private is the M&H, so just wasn't motivation enough. Stock round 2 here, Skunky Beer is up. He buys an NYH, recognizes that that private is, or that company is going to be running for quite a high revenue here. Antonio is also looking towards the NYH, needs to get some paying shares here. So probably is going to be going last in priority, which would mean Are You Happy should have priority into the next stock round. Are You Happy out of cash? Pyramidian is also out of cash, so it looks like just Antonio is going to be spreading cash around for the rest of the stock round. And I think he just bought 2 shares. So still sitting on a bunch of cash. A little bit of a slow start for him. NYH lays in Tokens Providence, no surprises there. Runs all 3 trains for 110. B&O trainless, and is actually heading down south. So if he had bought trains and tokened here, his revenue would be higher than his private revenue. I wasn't expecting for him to head south. And I don't know. He's not under any competition from the PRR, so it doesn't have to rush to Lancaster, I suppose. But this is $80 out of his undercapitalized company that he's not going to have for later. We'll see if he buys any trains here. He does, and he even buys into the threes. He should have had a private. No, just the B&O. So buys some expensive trains and lays expensive track, but is just opening up the privates for Are You Happy, who I think we said had the M&H. So RU is heading towards Chicago and will buy his three, but doesn't buy his private. Interesting. Okay. Are You Happy ends up with priority, has a decent amount of cash, but could have had a lot more if he had bought his private there. Not sure why he decided not to. Regardless is first up and buys the NYNH. Pretty high revenue there, as noted. Pyramidion is going to actually sell out of the NYNH. A little bit surprised by that. Buys a C&O. Skunky Beer is selling the NYNH as well. Interesting. I hope that these players are going to push trains to rush these twos if they're selling these shares. Skunky Beer buys a C&O. Antonio buying the B&O. So he has one company, one share in each of the companies. Pyramidion is doubling down on the C&O. And we see everybody passing actually. So Antonio is still sitting on a bunch of cash and not buying up more than one share in each company. I was a little bit confused there for a second because I think he was on AutoPass and Peridian took two actions in a row. So Peridian has an early share lead and pretty good revenue in the NYNH, 2 shares in the market. Looking okay for him. We'll see if anybody gets into their privates here. C&O laying not the number 2, so potentially leaving that open for the other players in the East. And it's going to delay his progress into Pittsburgh, which I assume is where he ultimately wants to go, unless we're going to see him rush over to the double O's, which would be a little bit unusual. Running for 110, pays it, and still not buying the private. NYNH, happy to upgrade Providence for, I think that's going to increase his revenue by $20, so 130 for him. Pays it, and he's going to be the first to buy in his privates. Not the most expensive, but still, you got to buy him in. B&O, we were a little bit confused by the early track development for him. He has 3 trains now. Nobody's pushing trains, and he's got pretty good revenue with those 3 trains, 150, and he'll just pay it out. So pretty slow start to the game. We do have another operating set here, operating round. C&O is heading over to Pittsburgh. A little bit of a detour here. Unusual to head into Pittsburgh from the west or northwest like this. We'll usually head in for the west because the yellow city will just get you into Altoona that way. This way he's going to lose a track point by having to upgrade Pittsburgh to head any further east. He's running for 110 again and does buy in his private, so just didn't want to buy it in during the 0.1 of the operating round. I think myself and maybe the other players have forgotten that we actually broke into 3s, so we do have 2 operating rounds here. Makes sense to wait until later to buy in your private. NYNH upgrading the New York token should have pretty darn good revenue here. 150 pays it out, and as aggressive as it is to buy 3 2 trains, this slow start to this game and the fact that nobody's buying in their privates, only 3 companies have floated, it's making it look better than it probably has any right to. Pretty good revenue here. B&O, he is going to upgrade Washington, and as a result, his revenue increases up to 170. Again, he's not under any competition for Lancaster, so I suppose running down south is excusable. I don't think it's the great long-term move, especially when you have to token there. The B&O is just really tight on tokens, and dropping one in Washington really limits your late game potential. But he's living large for now, pays out 190. Stock round 4. A lot of cash in this stock round. People were able to buy in their privates, except for Antonio, of course, who still hasn't floated a company. Skunky Beer is going to be leading us off and has his pick of the litter if he wants to sell down. We'll have to sell out pretty heavily out of the B&O if he wants to float. We'll see what his decision is. Selling the C&O and does sell the B&O. It's going to float the B&M. B&M does have its track pre-laid for it by the NYNH, so of the companies remaining, perhaps the most attractive. Makes sense. Antonio, he is passing again. Are You Happy's up? He's selling out and should have a pretty easy float. He's going to take the NYC. Let's look at the map there for that. Potentially can get into New York. May even be able to snag a run into Reading and Allentown if he's lucky. What's his other company? C&O. So not a whole lot of synergy between those 2 companies. But options are limited here. I'm surprised that nobody's taken this PRR, although it's highly likely to be bought by the B&O at Lancaster, so maybe not as attractive as you would sometimes think. Peridian, he is also selling out and is going to start the CPR. CPR, not the greatest company. We'll see if he's able to link that up with his NYH. The fact that the NYC is floating may give him a little bit of an edge, just because some track is going to be laid by the NYC, get him down there faster. Otherwise, he has to head west all by his lonesome, and it takes a very long time to develop any revenue in the CPR that way. Back to Skunky Beer, he's going to buy the B&M. Antonio passed last time. We'll see if he wants to do anything. Now he is selling out, and he will be floating his PRR for Max. RU buying his he's floating his company. Permidian floating. So it looks like everybody's going to be floating here. We'll try and move through this quickly. 4 new companies floating here. This game is going to get a pretty fast acceleration, and it looks like Skunky Beer is going to end up with priority. CPR, first to operate, is not going to lay any track just yet. One thing we should look at is if Peridian controls the Champlain and St. Lawrence. Looks like he does. So this CPR may be just a suitcase, and then he could go back and take the Erie. We'll see if that's what his decision is. Buying a bunch of trains here, and he's actually going to rust his own 2s. I guess that's fair. Suitcase the CPR and then run 3 trains out of the NYH still. You have the track for it and the tokens. Fair enough. PRR, first operation, is actually going to immediately teleport to Scranton and should be able to beat the NYC and the B&O there. And I guess he was worried about being token out at Lancaster. All right. So he's going to secure his access into New York. That's a nice break for Antonio. Late start, but is going to get right into the thick of it. Buys a 4. NYC heading down towards New York, presumably. Buys a 4 as well. B&M, first operation, is going to upgrade Boston, immediately tokens Providence, and buys a 4 and a train across from the B&O. So a little bit of a loss of efficiency there. B&O is going to lose a run on that 3 train and actually falls back trainless as a result. That's bad news. He controls 80% of that revenue, had decent runs for himself, but is going to shuffle trains and introduce a little inefficiency, which is going to set him behind. NYH, and with all these trains being bought, where do we stand with the 5s? Oh, wow, he actually bought the Poison 4 there. I guess he didn't really have an option. That means that the 5s are available, and NYH is probably a withhold away from getting it. So this is a pretty fast train rush, which is, or I guess should not be surprising, considering we just had 4 companies float in a single stock round. Pretty explosive. NYH is going to link up with Albany and actually breaks his own suitcase. I wonder if the 5 train coming out changed his strategy. If the 5 train had not come out, I am assuming we would have seen a suitcase on the CPR, but now that the 5 train has come out, he may realize that he doesn't really want to try and get stuck running 3 trains in the NYH and is instead going to just relegate himself to running both companies now that he's guaranteed a cheap permanent train in the NYH. Can't tell for sure without talking to the player, of course, but I wonder if that's what we're seeing here. NYH is going to pay out and actually doesn't buy the 5. Did he not have enough cash with the withhold? He should have. $90 of revenue. Yeah, he could have withheld that and bought the 5. Am I crazy? No, he definitely does. All right, so forgoing that, C&O is not going to snag it. He's going to get into Pittsburgh and tokens it. As noted, Pittsburgh is not going to upgrade or needs to be upgraded to get into Altoona and further east now as a result of this kind of weird detour. Pays it out. Still not seeing a 5 train bought. Looks like B&O is actually going to be able to bring it out. That's good news for him. And I think I was criticizing his decision to shuffle trains here and buy the Poison 4, but maybe I should walk that back because I think he has basically left himself open for a 5 train in the B&O as a result of this. Okay, so just securing himself a permanent train by shuffling. Sometimes you have to accept a little inefficiency to make that happen. I was too quick to criticize. B&O, he is going to upgrade Lancaster, blocks the PRR, but not really because the PRR is going to get into Reading and Allentown. And he's going to buy a train and then buy the 5. That means the NYH does indeed have to discard trains, which I had thought he was going to try and avoid by buying the 5, but no such luck. CPR is up and does lay the expensive track to head down to Albany, and He will pay it out and buy a 5. 1 5 left. I think Antonio probably is going to withhold here for that. Gets into New York and runs for 90, withholds, and the last 5 is gone. NYC with a 4 train, upgrading New York. He may be within striking distance of the 6. He instead is going to lay up towards the CPR. Pays out. So with $130 of revenue, he would have had money for the 6. Even without the New York upgrade, he would have had money for it. That is confusing to me. CNO only has a 3 train, so I guess he's worried about the train rush. Doesn't want to rust his only train. He needs to make sure he gets at least one of these 6s, though. He's going to bankrupt if he has to buy 2 Ds. So maybe he shuffles the train out of the CNO and buys the 6 there. Either way, you lose the run then. Hard decision. He is going to shuffle the train, so would have lost the run either way. I think if you're going to do that, you probably want to just outright buy the 6, and then the NYNH doesn't get to run 2 trains. He is running for 230. CNO is upgrading Pittsburgh, will buy the 6. B&M upgrading his home and running a 4 for 180, paying it out. B&O, shiny new 5 train, where's he heading? He's heading nowhere, apparently. Blocks himself in Philadelphia. Should have laid this tile differently if he wanted to get into New York. And doesn't have money for the token. So even if he had laid this with access into New York, could have been tokened out by Antonio on the PRR. Also doesn't have money on for token, though, so it would have been a race between those 2 companies to see who got that. But a moot point because he's blocked himself. Runs for 170, withholds to stay yellow, and we are into the stock round. Not a whole lot of cash into this stock round just because people were shuffling for 5 trains and withholding. So everyone's going to pick up a share or 2, and then we should be into the operating round. Skunky with 11 shares is second in terms of share density, but actually 3rd place in terms of net worth. Peridian is our leader, but I do think that this CPR may end up being a liability for him, cause him to fall behind a little bit. We'll see if he's able to catch up its shares and start just running his companies to maintain a lead. Antonio is the clear trailing player in this game. Does have a permanent train, decent run for himself, but only 1 company and just massive share deficit. Not looking great for him. Skunky buying a B&O. Cheap yellow shares, fair enough. Antonio is going to join him. Are you happy? The last yellow B&O share. Perennian is buying the PRR from the IPO, actually taking a little bit of a hit to do that. If he gets to run both trains, the revenue will be great. And I guess it's pretty likely that he does. Unless the Erie floats, I don't see us coming out with a D train anytime soon. So fair enough. Skunky out of cash. Antonio, 1 more share for him. He'll pick up a CPR of all companies. Okay. RU is going for the B&M. Perennian is going back for the NYC, and we should be into the next operating round. This operating round 5, we'll have 3 sets here since we had the 5s come out last time. CPR gets an upgrade into Albany. Doesn't have money for the token, but really doesn't have any competition for the token either, unless the PRR wants to start fighting. But I think we've already established that the PRR doesn't have token money either. So the 5 run from the CPR is halfway decent. It gets into New York at least. He's going to run for 170 and pay it out. NYC upgrades Albany. Tokens in New York, that really doesn't hurt the CPR at all, but I suppose it hurts the B&M a little bit, depending on what train he has. I think he just has a 4 train, so it probably doesn't hurt him until he gets a longer train. Yeah, we'll see if he ends up with a D or 6 in that company. He's going to withhold, actually. So NYC's withholding is, are you happy, going to make a push for the D train? He's a far ways off. Probably going to happen in another 2 ORs or so. PRR, 2 trains, as previously noted, is going to upgrade Pittsburgh and is able to run both of them for 240, decent. NYNH, looking to head over to Rochester, perhaps. Paying 180. B&M, running for 180 as well. Withholding, are you happy? CNO, actually not interested in heading over to Lancaster. Going to lay kind of a random track over here. Not entirely sure what the rationale for that is. I guess it would, in theory, get him into Washington down here, but is that really a priority? Doesn't seem to synergize with his other company, the NYC, at all. B&O, 5 train is going to upgrade Baltimore. Again, if you're the CNO, why not lay the gentle so you can get into Baltimore for that revenue? running for 190 withholding. So I think we saw Skunky Beer withhold on both of his companies. B&M withheld and the B&O both withheld. So he is, I guess, leader in terms of the race towards the D train upgrade. Could already, in theory, have 4 to 6. So maybe he just wants to shuffle trains and run a 6 in the B&M. We'll have to see if he buys a train across. He's not going to do it just yet. CPR, also interested in heading to Rochester. He's going to pay out again, and he shuffles a train into the NYNH. So is he going to just emergency buy a 6 here and get a leg up on the other players? He does. He has to sell a share to do it, which is always painful. We'll have to probably suffer the consequences in the stock round where he's going to have a little bit less cash than the other players potentially, unless he's able to force the other players to bring out a D train and they have to buy trains too, which is possible. But he now has all of his trains set up for himself. NYC has money for a token. Is he going to secure Rochester? He does. And is running for 180, also withholding. So everybody is worried about these D trains now. PRR sitting pretty with 2 permanent trains. Actually gets himself a little bit of a better run. Now can run into Baltimore by Washington. Is also going to token in Philadelphia. I don't know that this token is all that useful. All right, we'll see how the Philadelphia track upgrades and if there's any competition for it. Running for 290, pretty good revenue. CNO is going to upgrade Baltimore again, it looks like. Runs a 6 train and pays for 240, decent revenue. Skunky Beer, B&M, is paying for 180 still. He's withholding. Should be very close to the D train upgrade now. And he only needs 1 permanent train, so with a shuffle here, he could probably bring it out right now. We'll fall back on the B&O if he does do that. Looks like he did do the shuffle. B&O is going to upgrade Philadelphia and buys and upgrades the D. It does happen with a operating round left before the stock round, so everyone should be in a little bit of trouble in terms of affording their final permanent trains here. Pretty important to make this happen in point 2 and not point 3, because in point 3, people will have time to have a stock round in between, can buy paying shares, and invest their cash before they have to buy this next rank of trains. CPR, unaffected by the D train, is going to lay a random upgrade and pay for 170. NYNH, really interested in this hex on the map in particular with both of his companies, running for 240, paying in it. PRR is going to get access into Baltimore with his 5 train, so his run is decent. He lost his 4 train, but he did manage to secure some access into high-value revenue centers. He's running for 220 with his 5, paying it out. CNO, finally heading over to Lancaster. I don't think I've seen a game in a while where it's been so long before Lancaster became relevant. CNO's withholding, and I think he still needs a train. He does. Pretty close to D-train money, and may just want to shuffle here to have money into the stock round, buy it in the next set of operating rounds. He's going to upgrade Hamilton Toronto, has established a nice little D run for himself, needs to probably double back to hit that other double O. He is going to shuffle as expected. B&M, not a whole lot of track left for him, running for 190, pays it out. B&O has developed a nice little loop for himself through Philadelphia. He's going to be able to hit both of these Philadelphia tracks and then into Baltimore, it looks like. So his revenue is going to be 310. I think that's the highest in the game. And it looks like he actually tokened too. Just didn't want his run to be cut. So B&O has decent revenue, but he is still in last place. Has a decent amount of shares. So as long as he doesn't fall behind in shares here, is probably not out of the game. Needs to make sure that his B&O runs are protected and try and mess with the other D runs that are going to be coming out here. So particularly the CNO, I suppose. Permidian is still our leader, but is trailing in shares here by a fair amount. Are you happy? His position in the game is a little bit inflated because he still is needing a D train for another $500. So not actually probably in second place, maybe in last in terms of actual net worth. Skunky Beer is going to lead us off, and he has a decent amount of cash, so hopefully we'll be able to maintain his share lead here. He's going to buy a B&O with a D train, highest revenue in the game, definitely a reasonable share to be buying. Only downside for him is that he's going to have to withhold to maintain 70% of the company, and he is already right at the threshold. So probably not going to maintain those shares for more than a set of operating rounds. Antonio's up and the B&O is now floating up. Are You Happy is buying the NYH 6 train, seems reasonable. Peridian is actually going for his own CPR, pretty expensive share. He does get some arbitrage for that, so may see him sell this share just to get an extra 26 bucks for other paying shares. We'll see. I don't think the CPR is otherwise an attractive company to be buying. A little bit surprised we don't see the Erie floats. Is that fair to say? No. I guess the Erie runs are pretty much dead already unless he can get over into Scranton or Pittsburgh, which there's no guarantees that that's allowed to occur. So we may see the Erie go unfloated here, which is going to make the orange strategy a little bit less powerful. There's just going to be fewer shares in the game, so being able to exceed your share limit is going to be probably less effective. CPR is sold down, and PRR is being bought. Antonio, NYH, Are You Happy? PRR, Permidian is also buying the PRR. PRR is now floating. Skunky going back for the CPR share, maybe just looking for $11 to trash it again. Not yet. NYH, we'll see if that company floats. Looks like it's getting close. Peridian is, yeah, one share away from floating up the NYH as well. Skunky does trash the CPR, and now we have 3 companies floating up. Antonio going for the NYC. Are You Happy? Out of cash. Peridian, last share for him. It'll be a B&M. Skunky Beer is passing on cash and probably hoping to maintain priority, but we'll see if Antonio messes that up for him. Looks like he buys a share, so bad news for Skunky Beer. And Antonio might end up with priority if Skunky Beer ends up deciding that going third versus fourth doesn't matter to him. But no such luck. So Antonio is still taking actions and is actually going to buy a share of the C&O, which does not have not a train. So we'll see. Is he going to just trash it? Wouldn't be a very devastating trash if he did. Skunky Beer goes back and does buy a share, fed up with Antonio losing him priority. And now this means that maybe Antonio does end up with priority. Looks like it. Nice. All right. CPR is laying kind of random track. Not sure what the point of that is. Running for 170, pays it out. NYH is also laying random track. Runs for 240, pays it. PRR is going to upgrade Scranton and runs his 5 for 230. C&O does need a D train. We'll see if he is able to buy it here, if he shuffles again. Looks like he is selling shares, and we see everybody with permanent trains now. The C&O D train run is decent. Gets to run into Chicago, into Baltimore, or potentially into Philadelphia. I think probably Philadelphia is the higher revenue. This is 90. Yeah, it's a $10 difference, so kind of negligible. B&M out of track, really just on autopilot for the rest of the game. NYC is making the decision to head further west instead of doubling back into the 00. It's going to be a long time before this track pays any real dividends. This would be just 2 track points to get over here. And does he have a long enough train to really run through these dits and all this territory over here? Probably not with a 6 train. So we'll see. Runs for 230 for now. C&O, first run of the D train. Or not the first run, he's been running that for a while. 320, and he is going to pay it out. So that 70% of the company is probably not going to be maintained into the next stock round. CPR is potentially setting up for a run into the south. Would be quite expensive to make that happen. Runs for 170. And he actually tokened in Albany too. I missed that he got the cash. I think people were trashing this company and give him some market share so he was able to actually afford a token. I don't think that affects anybody who runs. Maybe the NYNH is sad about that, but probably not. NYNH is running for 230, just $10 less than what he was running previously. Pays it. PRR, not doing a whole lot. C&O, new D train, is running for 250, it looks like. B&M out of track as noted. Withholding. What is Skunky Beer getting up to? Not sure. NYC, not a whole lot for him either. Making progress towards the double O's, but doesn't have cash to lay that track even. Paying. Skunky Beer withheld on his other company, and He is going to withhold on the B&O as well. Still only yellow, so still would have to sell a share as it stands. He's got a bunch of cash now. Is he going to bring out a third permanent train? Could see it. He is $500 behind the leader. We probably have two sets of operating rounds left. I don't think bringing out a third train is going to pay off. I don't think it'll give him the win. So these withholds are questionable. CPR, more kind of random track. I don't know that he has much track worth laying, so maybe just bored. NYH, running for 230, paying it. PRR is tokening Pittsburgh. That cuts the B&O runs. That's bad news for Skunky Beer. He's running for 230. NYC, no track for him. Pays it. CNO doesn't have his runs cut, so he's unaffected by that token. 250, paying it. B&M, 120. Actually, spending 120, and will run for 220 this time. B&O, he withheld last time, and now is probably a little bit annoyed by that token on Pittsburgh. What's he going to do? So because of the withhold, he's able to link up with Scranton, and his run should be, well, I guess still pretty good here then. So it runs for 340, actually a $20 increase despite the Pittsburgh token. I think that works out pretty well for him, and he pays it out. We are into stock round 7. Let's just keep stock of the game state here. There's $7,000 left in the bank, so probably 2 more sets of operating rounds. The revenue in this game is pretty low. The B&O is the exception, but we also only have 7 companies running because the Erie hasn't floated. If the Erie floats, that's certainly going to extend the game. So yeah, with $7,000 left and people are going to be buying expensive shares, should definitely see another set of operating rounds after the upcoming set. Antonio is first up, and he is in, it looks like, third place, narrowly behind Skunky Beer. He has the PRR as his only company and is not cert locked. I don't think too many players are going to reach their cert limit here just because we have only 7 companies floated and there's plenty of room on a bunch of these players. So the cert limit and this yellow strategy is probably not going to be a huge impact on the game here. Are you happy? NYC and the CNO. The CNO has a decent run. NYC is not too far behind, but he is developing quite a deficit in terms of net worth compared to the leader and is already a share behind. Permidian is our share leader, has pretty poor revenue on the CPR compared to the other companies. The NYNH is about par for the course, but definitely not a leader. So although he is in first place now, if the revenue of the B&O continues to be high, we could see people with more shares than Peridian starting to climb ahead. Skunky Beer is the last player, and both of his companies have decent revenue, at least average. So he's not out. He's only $400 behind. I think that if we hadn't seen him withhold as much as he has, he would actually probably be ahead of Peridian here. So these withholds are going to be quite costly. Let's look at that for a second. Skunky is B&M and B&O. Looking at the spreadsheet here, B&O withheld once, but had to withhold a couple of times earlier. B&M also withheld once. So if he gets half of this cash, that's about $300 that he would have into his personal treasury compared to Permidian. Permidian has 1 share of the B&M and none of the B&O. So almost all of this cash would be going net towards Skunky Beer as opposed to Meridian, and he's only trailing by about $400. So this net worth lead is almost exclusively due to these decisions to withhold here. And the withholding is not doing anything for him because he's yellow in the B&O, but he's nowhere near his cert limit. So, I think this game would have been pretty close here if Skunky Beer played it a little bit differently. Needs to do something with those withholds. I guess one of the withholds already paid off for him because it allowed his B&O run to continue. We'll see. The revenue here might be high enough for him to come back from this despite that. Let's jump into the stock round. Antonio's up. He is going to par the Erie. I think that loses him the game. This company has no run potential. It's going to have to decrease his net worth by $100 just by the fact of buying a train, and he is going to fall back on these shares at least once. So I think that puts him out of contention. Are you happy? Buys the NYNH. Peridian is buying a CNO share. CNO has decent revenue with the D train. Fair enough. Skunky Beer is actually going to sell, he has to sell that B&O share, and he needs to pray that Peridian doesn't end up with that. Either Antonio or Are You Happy should snag that. They both have the cash and space for it. He's going to go back for PRR. Antonio buys the B&O. I think you have to do that. Are You Happy will buy a B&M. Peridian is buying a CPR. There's got to be more attractive shares than that, right? Even his own NYNH would be better. Okay. Skunky Beer is buying the CNO. Antonio buying a CNO as well. I think it's wise to buy the paying shares while you can and then float your company at the end of the stock round. I think it's a mistake to float this company at all, but if you're going to do it, this is the way to do it. Are You Happy? NYNH, CPR, or sorry, Peridian buying the NYC. So really only 5 shares left outside the Erie in this game. So I don't think we're going to see anybody but Peridian really hit their share limit. NYC is floating up. Antonio is buying the CPR, which I believe means he cannot float the Erie without selling a share now. Are You Happy? Also CPR. Peridian is going to float the Erie. So interesting. Because Peridian cannot buy the CPR, he's going to help the Erie float, and that means that Antonio is free to buy a CPR. Skunky Beer is also buying a CPR, and Erie is going to float now, it looks like. Other players are buying the Erie just as a result of needing to fill their cert limit. Skunky Beer is selling shares. Probably shouldn't be doing that. There's nowhere else to put your money. And he will buy an Erie. PRR is probably a strictly better company. You hurt Peridian's net worth by selling the shares down a little bit, but this is kind of a inconsequential change in net worth, I wouldn't say. And these are shares that Peridian can now buy. So if Peridian doesn't want these kind of crummy CPR shares, he can sell here and buy here. I think this is not a good move from Skunky Beer. This game is going to be close between Skunky Beer and Peridian, or at least it should be. But this kind of decision is game losing. Antonio now almost sold out on the Erie, actually. Peridian is not going to take the opportunity to buy these PRR shares, so maybe Skunky Beer is going to get away with a little bit of inefficiency. And we're into operating round 7. Peridian CPR does have token money here. Doesn't really have any place interesting to lay it necessarily. Is going to upgrade into Boston, and his run is 180, $10 better, pays it out, NYNH. Laying more track in the east there, 230 pays it. Erie's first operation. He is going to shuffle a train out of the PRR and give all the money to the PRR. So he wants to run a D train in the PRR. Does the PRR have a decent D run? Yes, it does. Well, it's actually interesting. The way this track was upgraded, he actually can't run through New York into the west here. There's just no connection here to allow him to do that. But he can run up through Scranton and then down into Baltimore. So yes, the PRR's run is actually pretty good for a D train. It does hurt that he has to fall back on the PRR to do it, but I think that it's going to be a good enough run that it's probably worth doing. CNO is tokening Scranton. So that's bad news for the B&O. I think the B&O is, and by B&O I mean Skunky Beer, I think he's maybe done now. He really needed these runs to remain uncut for him to catch up to Peridian. And even if he's able to eventually bypass this and get better runs, losing out on the revenue for even an OR or two is going to be enough to put him behind. CNO now running for 360. PRR buys the train and actually buys the 5 out of the Erie. The Erie, is he going to try and suitcase the Erie? There's no way that's going to work, right? The PRR, CNO, and the NYC can all break that suitcase with a single track lay. I don't know why he bought that train. NYC pays for 230, B&M, 220, B&O, D-Train, has been tokened out of Scranton, so now is desperately trying to head west, it looks like. Maybe bypass Pittsburgh. That's going to take forever. His run is now 280. And the other factor that's going to be a problem for him is that the CNO now has a D train, and Promethean was able to get some shares there. Although now that I look at it, Skunky Beer and him are even, so that's not going to be a decider or a decision maker between the two of them in terms of the win. But Promethean is up by $700 now. I think this run cut for the B&O is his death knell. Pays out. CPR is up. CPR is actually upgrading down here, so got access through Reading and Allentown to the south of the map. And we see a token on Washington. I don't think I've ever seen the CPR token down here. And it doesn't cut anybody's run. Not really a very great token. Maybe it changes his run, though. So he's running up north currently. This token will allow him to run from Baltimore into Philly or Baltimore into New York. We'll have to see what the math is. So his run was 180. This token gets it up to 220. All right, good. Good news for him. NYH laying other track, 230. CNO running for 360. NYC. NYC, we commented a while ago how it should have head back to this double O. Still hasn't managed to make any progress at all here in the West. Not running that track anyways. Apparently has found a better run for himself, but still questionable. Running for 230, pays it. Erie, trainless. We commented on this. The PRR bought this train for no reason. He's going to buy it back out of the PRR, so loses the runs on that train several times now. We already thought he was out by virtue of just floating the Erie, though. PRR is going to upgrade Dunkirk, and his run should be pretty darn good. So, running for just 280. Let's look at that run for a second. It looks to me like he's got a better run by a fair amount. Instead of running up to Dunkirk out of Scranton, he should be running down to Lancaster and into Chicago along this track here. And that would add 30, I think $100 to his run. Missed opportunity for him. Paying for 280. B&M, no development for him, just 220. B&O, D run, and still heading west, but again, his run is only 280 now. This has been really rough for him. And not to toot my own horn a little bit, but I did comment at the beginning of this game that this Washington token is going to be a problem for him because he's not able to defend his runs. And lo and behold, here we are in operating round 7, and he's losing the game because he wasn't able to secure his D runs. 7.3. CPR running for 220. NYH also running down south and runs for 230. NYC, not sure where he's heading, 230. Looks like everybody's running for 230. That's just the number in this game. CNO runs for 360, bucking the trend. PRR, we were criticizing his run before. Looks like he's still not going to fix that. And I'm pretty confident that I'm reading this right. Someone in the comment call me out if I'm wrong, but Scranton, Lancaster, Pittsburgh, Chicago should be strictly better than Scranton to Dunkirk by a not insignificant margin. Pays it out. B&M, 220. Erie, first run in a while for this company because he's been shuffling trains needlessly. He's got a token. Hamilton, did he have any competition for that track? I don't imagine so. NYC is the only person that could get there, and he is not going to withhold for that. So just dropping a token randomly. B&O, slowly inching his way west. 280 is the number for him, and we're into stock round 8. Looking at the bank here, we should see the bank break into operating round 8, so maybe we can start fast forwarding here. There's not a whole lot of shares to buy, just the Erie. The Erie is not an attractive company, but the PRR is. Permidian is our leader by a decent margin. He is second in priority, so should be able to snag one of those companies, one of those shares. And then looks like we will see Are You Happy and Antonio also having to sell shares. Let's just see what they sell, and then we might be able to skip through the rest of this. Erie is being sold, reasonable, probably the worst run in the game, worst revenue. He is also going to sell a B&M, and that's a little bit harder to explain. Buys a PRR at least, makes sense. Oh, maybe he just had to sell 2 shares. I see. He was over his cert limit, so he had to sell 2 shares in order to make room for the PRR. Fair enough. Permidian, he is also selling an Erie and snags the PRR. Good news for him. The rich are getting richer. Skunky Beer, no share room for him. And in terms of shares available, I suppose the B&M is better than his Erie. May want to sell that. Instead, going to sell a CPR. CPR has not the greatest revenue, but has a lot of stock appreciation, so probably not as bad as it looks. What does he buy instead? He buys an Erie. Okay, well, that's just strictly worst. Strictly worse. Bad decision. And I think he was the player we thought might be contending with the win for Peridian, but he is far out of that contention now. Antonio is going to have to sell too. So he sells B&M, he sells CPR. Again, the CPR is probably better than these players think. It's accumulating, I want to say $20, and it's about to jump up to $40. Don't know that you want to sell those shares, but he is. And I think we can skip through the rest of this now. Skunky Beer is selling more good shares for more bad shares. I don't know why he wants these Erie shares. Peridian is going to snag the shares that his opponent is selling. So just more good news for him. And let's just skip through this. This is painful to watch. Looking at the spreadsheet here, Peridian was in the lead and is still in the lead. Didn't gain the most in that stock round. And actually, if we look at the revenues here, the other players are beginning to catch up with him on terms of revenue. But with only 3 operating rounds left, he has a lead of $400 and $1,000 on those 2 players. So even though Are You Happy is running for, $70 to $100 more than him, $400 behind 3 operating rounds, it's not going to be enough to come back. I don't think there's much life left in this game. I think we can just look at the revenues. So let's skip this operating round. Doesn't look like a whole lot happened with the track. Spreadsheet. Peridian actually was ahead of RU, which was going to be his closest competitor, we thought. So I think we can call this for Peridian. It would have to be a pretty big shakeup to change the game state. Does look like Peridian takes it by a $500 margin. Pretty good. Skunky Beer, the player we thought was going to potentially take it from Peridian, actually comes in last place. So there must have been something weird going on in that last set of operating rounds that I wasn't accounting for. And then Antonio and Are You Happy are the 2 middle players. I think that this win for Peridian really comes down to some mistakes from Skunky Beer, which we talked about, but more importantly, the fact that Peridian was in a position to just consistently pay. So you look at his CPR, never withheld, only fell back once when it was first floated. And then the N1H, same story, fell back one time the entire game, but always paid. You look at these other companies, the B&Ms withholding, the CNOs withholding a lot, the B&Os withholding a ton, NYC, same. So everybody else with withholding and forced to emergency buy trains and all this stuff, Peridian just managed to skate through the game and just pay out. He was running good companies and happy to do so. Everybody else was doing all this fancy stuff, trying to bypass blockades. Peridian just locked down his runs early, got the trains he needed, and skated to a victory, which is fair enough. Sometimes you just got to keep it simple. So well played to him. He's going to be advancing to the second round, and we will continue to follow the tournament. Thanks for watching along.